Now available as paperback and e-reader from the author of Spinsterella, A Strange and Unusual Romance, and Spellbound, A Darker Shade of Black comes the legendary Mad Matilda. And you get the conclusion to the Spinsterella trilogy in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers today. Why should you pick up my new goth novel, The Legendary Mad Matilda? Well, if you've read the first two goth novels in the Spinsterella trilogy, Spellbound, which is set in 1989 and chronicles Matilda Crowley's life as a baby bat when she first enters the goth subculture, and Spinsterella, which chronicles Matilda Crowley's life as an elder goth, you'll know that there was a big gap in the timeline between 1989 and 2015. And The Legendary Mad Matilda is designed to be the book that fills in many of the details between Spellbound and Spinsterella, and tells the story of why the Matilda Crowley character wound up leaving the industrial rave scene and the club scene to become a part of corporate America. And The Legendary Mad Matilda is a very dark and tragic tale. I believe it's the darkest story in the Spinsterella trilogy. It's one where we see the Matilda Crowley character making the transition from, again, not only the goth club and industrial scene and the rave scene to corporate America, but it's where she's at a major crossroads in her life. And when people are coming out of college, as I've seen it, because I know from my own experience coming out of college, you wind up at a major crossroads and you're trying to figure out what you want to do with your life when you come out of school. You want to figure out what type of job you want to take, what type of career you want to pursue, and what direction you want to take in your life. And when it comes down to the Matilda Crowley character, she's trying to figure out not only what she wants to do with her professional career, but she wants to figure out what she wants to do when she's a part of the goth subculture. Now, when it comes down to the goth subculture, I see it as having three phases, because as a person grows in the goth subculture, they change in different ways. And I see it as having three phases, just like growing up from childhood to adolescence to adulthood. And the first phase of being a goth, as I see it, was the baby bat phase. And in the baby bat phase, that's when you're discovering the music, you're discovering the fashion, and you're discovering things as related to the subculture, and you're starting to learn about the subculture, and you're learning the basics about things. Now, the second phase, as I see it, is the adolescent phase. And just like being a teenager, you're trying on different roles, exploring different aspects of the subculture, and finding the place where you believe you will fit into the subculture. And the adolescent phase is what I call like a really crazy phase, and you're trying to find what you like and what you feel comfortable with, and you're trying to find what makes you feel satisfied and comfortable in the subculture. Now the adult phase, or the elder phase as some people call it, this is the phase where people have found their role, they are comfortable in their role, and they are passing on what they know about the subculture to others. That's what the elders usually do. They try to pass culture on, pass traditions on, and pass music on to other people, and pass different things on to other people. Now, Spellbound was the baby bat Matilda Crowley, and Spinsterella was the elder Matilda Crowley. Now, the legendary Mad Matilda is the adolescent Matilda Crowley, and this is the phase with the Mad Matilda character. And the Mad Matilda is the woman who has the big pigtails and the crazy outfits, and she's trying to figure out what role she's going to play in the subculture, and what part she's going to play in the subculture. And she's trying to figure out what direction she wants to go in as related to her career as the Mad Matilda hostess, because the Matilda Crowley Mad Matilda is a hostess of these industrial goth raves, and she's also an event manager of these raves. She coordinates them, she puts them together, and she makes sure that everybody has a good time at her events. And another reason why you would want to pick up this legendary Mad Matilda is because it's a story that takes you into the business of events like your raves, like your club nights, and like your music festivals, because when it comes down to these types of events, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes, and a lot is done to make that night entertaining for everyone. And a lot of people don't really understand what goes on in that to make those nights enjoyable for everyone. The logistics that goes on behind the scenes, making sure that people are where they're supposed to be, making sure that there are enough refreshments, making sure that the entertainment is good, making sure that the DJ is playing the right songs, and making sure that everyone has the accommodations and amenities there so that they can have a good time. And that's what the Matilda Crowley, or the Mad Matilda character, does in the legendary Mad Matilda. She's the event manager, she's the event coordinator, and she's also the hostess that gets the crowd going and gets them excited. So there's a lot in the story about the business of these events, and a lot of people are going to learn about goth events and the business of event management and event planning from this book. They're also going to learn something as related to black culture from this book, because in this story I not only talk about the Matilda Crowley character from the perspective of her being a African American goth, but I also delve into her family. Now in Spellbound, I dealt with Matilda's relationship with her father, but in Legendary Mad Matilda, I explore her relationship with her mother. And in this story, I go back to a point that relates to an old African proverb which says, "A race can rise no higher than the moral position of its women." And from that point, I learned about the mother being the first teacher of culture to her children. And what the Muriel Crowley character is trying to do is pass on her culture to Matilda as relates to the workplace and surviving in the workplace, because this is a life skill that mothers pass on to their children when they enter the workplace. And while Matilda did work in Spellbound, in fast food, working in corporate America is completely different. And you have to, and as I see it, a lot of girls really need a mentor. And the mother who works there is a great mentor to her daughter. And what she's trying to do is pass things on to her daughter so that she can learn how to survive in the workplace. Excuse me. And those skills she learns help her as she continues to try to find her place in the subculture and find her place in life. And the whole legendary Mad Matilda book, while it is a dark and tragic story, is the story of a woman coming of age and learning life skills she will need to be a woman and go out into the world. So the legendary Mad Matilda has a lot of different aspects and different facets in it, and it's a rich, multi-dimensional story which will give you some perspective on the Matilda Crowley character as a black woman and as black woman in the goth subculture. And I believe that this is the story that will really take you deeper into the goth subculture than Spellbound and Spinsterella, because this story is set in the 1990s during what many people call the heyday of the goth subculture and the best years of the goth subculture. And I tried to do extensive research into the goth subculture to make this story as a so you could dig deep into the goth subculture and understand many aspects of the goth subculture. And I wanted you to really be there in the 1990s like you were in the 1980s with Spellbound. So I really wanted this book to really give you a really good understanding of the goth subculture as it relates in the 1990s, and I wanted to give you a good picture of life in the 1990s. Now, I make a lot of mentions of many different 90s aspects. I talk about the trash talk shows of the 90s. I talk about life in New York in the 1990s, because in the 1990s in New York City, life was really changing from the 1980s. Now, the 1980s were a really dark and gritty period, and I went over that in Spellbound, but in the 1990s we had Rudy Giuliani as mayor of New York, and he was doing things like the Quality of Life campaign to clean up New York. So it was a very different time in the city, and it was a different period in the city. And I wanted to really take you into the 1990s and show you what life was like in the 1990s. Now, I draw a lot from my personal experiences graduating college in the 1990s and trying to find work and trying to find my own way in life in the 1990s. And I also draw from different inspirations and different ideas. And when the legendary Mad Matilda, it's a very, again, a very dark book, but it's a very inspiring book because it will show you how somebody can take a great tragedy and turn it into a great triumph. You can pick up the legendary Mad Matilda in paperback, in Kindle, or other e-reader platforms such as Nook and Smashwords by clicking the link in the description box, and you can pick up the other books in the Spinsterella trilogy, Spellbound and Spinsterella, on Amazon.com and other online booksellers by clicking the links in the description box.